When the law failed, ordinary men became executioners. In Indiana, they stopped trains. In New Orleans, they stormed jails. What began as justice often turned into terror. A train was ripped open at night. The outlaws escaped again. Fury spread through the town. Patience had run out. Masked men gathered in secret. Their decision was made. Under the cover of night, the riders moved fast. They broke into the jail and dragged the prisoners out. Ropes were already waiting. Some fought, others begged, but none were spared. Under the tree, the masked men stood in silence. Justice had become something much darker. News of the killing spread through the town like wildfire. Some called it justice. Others whispered it was murder. The streets were divided. At night, groups of men gathered with torches and ropes. Fear settled over the town like a heavy fog. Inside the prison, the remaining inmates sat in silence. They knew they could be next. Blood still marked the cold stone floor. Outside, more masked figures were already forming in the shadows. What began as revenge was slowly turning into something darker and harder to control. In a quiet room, a reporter wrote through the night, his pen moving fast. This story was far from finished. The masked men didn't stop. They began riding through the countryside, burning homes and attacking anyone they suspected. Families hid in terror as riders circled their houses with torches. No one felt safe anymore. Some tried to resist, but the organized riders overwhelmed them. Violence spread quickly across the land. Bodies started appearing in fields and along roads. The masked men showed no mercy. Families stood over their dead with lanterns in the dark. What began as justice had turned into pure terror. The countryside burned under the moonlight as the riders moved from one target to the next. Fear had completely taken over. The town was no longer the same. People stayed inside after dark, afraid of the next knock on the door. The masked riders grew bolder, dragging men from their homes in front of their families. Screams filled the night. Even the sheriff could do little. He watched as fires burned in the distance. The riders had become stronger than the law. Some tried to resist, but fear kept them from acting. By morning, homes were destroyed and bodies lay in the streets. One man stood on a hill, looking down at the burning town. He had once believed in their cause. Now he felt only emptiness. The masked men began turning on each other. Some wanted to stop. Others demanded more blood. The group was falling apart. Families stood at fresh graves under the moonlight. What started as justice had destroyed everything. A broken man sat alone among the ruins, holding the mask he once wore. Their justice had left nothing behind. The masked riders had vanished, but the town they left behind was unrecognizable. Homes stood empty, and fear still lingered in the air. Survivors gathered in silence. Some had lost everything. Others had lost themselves. In the ruins, a few looked at old wanted posters and wondered how justice had become this. A man stood alone on a cliff, no longer recognizing who he had become. The courthouse reopened, but the trials felt hollow. Too many graves had already been dug. In the end, the town was quiet, not because justice had won, but because there was almost nothing left to fight for. What began as revenge had burned everything to the ground. Only one question remained. Was any of it worth it? The town was quiet now. The masked riders were gone, but they left behind only broken homes and shattered lives. Survivors sat in silence among the ruins. They had won nothing, only loss. Some searched through the wreckage for anything worth saving. Others stood over fresh graves, unable to look away. A few tried to rebuild, but the damage ran deeper than broken walls. In the courthouse, the trials felt empty. Too many had already paid with their lives. At night, people gathered on church steps, too tired to sleep. One by one, some left town forever. Others stayed, haunted by what they had seen. The streets were empty. The flags still flew, but the town it once stood for had disappeared. In the end, only silence remained. What began as justice had destroyed everything, and nothing could bring it back. The town was gone. What remained were ruins, graves, and people who no longer knew how to live in the place they once called home. Some tried to rebuild. They hammered broken fences and carried wood through the dust, but their faces showed no hope, only exhaustion. Families walked away in silence, carrying what little they had left. Children looked back at the only home they had ever known, now reduced to ashes. At night, Survivors gathered around small fires. No one spoke much. They simply stared into the flames, each lost in their own grief. A man stood alone on a hill, looking down at the broken town. He had once believed their actions would bring justice. Now he saw only what they had destroyed. In the empty streets, the masks lay abandoned on the ground. The men who wore them had either left or become ghosts of who they once were. Some stayed to bury the dead. Others simply walked into the darkness, leaving everything behind. The town that had once stood for order had become a graveyard of its own making. And as the moon rose over the ruins, one truth remained. What began as revenge had left nothing worth saving. The road had ended. Those who could still walk left in silence, carrying nothing but the weight of what they had done. The town they once tried to save now belonged only to the wind and the dead. No one spoke of justice anymore. There was nothing left to protect. Some sat by dying fires, staring into the flames as if searching for answers that would never come. Others simply walked away, disappearing into the darkness. One man stayed behind. He sat beneath a tree, the broken mask at his feet. The newspaper beside him told stories of a time that no longer existed. He looked down the empty road one last time. There was no one left to judge him, no one left to forgive him. The town was quiet now. The graves were full. The masks were gone. And in the silence that remained, only one question lingered in the cold night air. Was it justice or revenge?